1,820 days, nearly 5 years. That is how long it's taken Specialized to launch the new Aethos. Yes, you've seen the title, you've seen the thumbnail, you've probably seen a bunch of other videos go live today, but I am going to be riding the bike. I'm going to share my thoughts on it, my pros, my cons, my thoughts on the builds that are available, and all the other little details that you might not see. So let's get into it, because it's going to be very interesting. Right, 2 quick disclaimers to get out of the way first. Specialized did not pay me to make this video. They just invited me to check out the bike and take it for a ride. And secondly, any ride impressions that I share in this video are just that. They are my ride impressions. Every human body is different. So what I feel versus what you might feel will vary. So keep that pinch of salt handy. Let's dive into some headline specifications of the new frame set. First up, cable routing is now fully integrated, and that is arguably the biggest visual difference between the old and the new bikes. Tyre clearance has been boosted by 3mm to 35mm with 4mm of space on either side. Frame stack has been increased by 15mm. That means that this measurement here has increased compared to the old Aethos. This tends to result in a bike feeling a bit more relaxed and less aggressive like a race bike, as it puts the rider in a slightly more upright position. The bike's wheelbase has increased by 7mm compared to the old Aethos, and while that doesn't sound like a lot, it will change how the bike feels. A longer wheelbase can help a bike feel more stable. This was achieved in part by decreasing the head tube angle by 1/2 degree. The frame is now UDH compatible, and the frame weighs in at a claimed 595 grams, 10 grams more than the old Aethos. Specialized saved some weight in some areas and then added it back in elsewhere wherever it was needed. I know when a new lightweight bike gets launched, people always say something along the lines of, well, it's going to fall apart, or it's not going to be very durable. It's for this reason that a line stood out to me in the press release. That being, Aethos 2 survived testing well beyond any industry standards. Even with 2,377 watts moving through the pedals over 100,000 times, Aethos didn't break a sweat. If this claim is true, then any question about lightweight bike durability should be put to bed. Along with this new Aethos, Specialized has launched a new set of lightweight wheels, dubbed the Alpinist CLX3s, and a new Alpinist carbon cockpit.
A quick one before we get on with the video. If you enjoy this video and you'd like to see more, then please consider subscribing. It helps more than you know.
I was lucky enough to jump on board the new S-Works Aethos with all the new shiny bits attached for a ride on my local roads. And after taking some time to digest the experience, I can share my initial impressions. The first thing that struck me was the new geometry. The increase in stack height was immediately obvious, and the less aggressive position put me at ease. I wasn't overextended at all. However, the new position lulled me into a false reality, because when I reached the base of the first climb of my ride and I went to jump out of the saddle to give it a big effort, I saw a new side to the bike, and this side was all about speed. The rear end of the bike is really tight and dynamic. The chainstay lengths have stayed the same as the old Aethos, which is significant because that means that the new Aethos has the same chainstay lengths as the Tarmac SL8, the brand's race bike. Over and over again, I was jumping out of the saddle on every climb, and it was clear that this is where the bike feels most at home. The playful back end is one thing, but the frame's stiffness makes for a perfect pairing. It's not stiff to the point where it's actually uncomfortable. Instead, it feels very similar to the Tarmac in that no matter how hard I tried, it felt like everything I was putting in as effort was being turned directly into speed. Of course, bigger, more powerful riders may have a different experience, but I can certainly say that this bike put a smile on my face. Obviously, when you reach the top of a climb, you then have to go back down it, and this is where I was interested to see how the bike would fare with its new longer wheelbase and slacker head tube angle. Both attributes, in theory, should make it calmer, more stable, and less twitchy. And well, I can confirm that I felt all of the above. It wasn't comparable to an endurance bike. The Aethos is much closer to a race bike in that respect, but it's just enough to soften the edges and keep the cortisol levels in check. The bike comes with 28mm tyres, and I imagine they do help keep weight down. Perhaps I've gotten too used to riding bikes with 30 and 32mm tyres, because the 28s all of a sudden felt very narrow. So if you wanted to increase this bike's comfort, grip and stability, then fitting some bigger rubber would certainly do the trick. Of course, the 28s do help keep weight down and will contribute to its feeling of fast acceleration, along with those very fancy new Alpinist wheels. The last thing I'll mention before I move on to the things that I didn't like so much is something rather simple. I love that this bike still has a traditional seat post band clamp and a 27.2mm seat post. It's part of what made the Aethos so good in the first place. At the time, many bikes were embracing proprietary components, so when Specialized came out with a round tubed bike that used typically conventional parts, it was a real breath of fresh air and became a large part of what the Aethos was all about. So I am really happy that it's still there. And actually, that nicely leads me on to my first con. The Aethos is now fully integrated. It's not a surprise. It would have been a surprise if they hadn't have gone integrated, but for the purists, it's a bit of a shame, but something I'd be happy to live with. My next con is the price. It's a seriously expensive machine, but do hang around because I'll speak about price in detail a little bit later on. I think the sizing of components is really good across all sizes of the Aethos. The only thing I would question is whether or not the smallest build, the 49cm build, should have been given 36cm bars rather than 38s. But alas, I think on the whole, Specialized has done a very good job of component sizing. And lastly, when I was riding the bike, I felt that the shifters were perhaps a bit too high for me. Had I had the opportunity to really finesse the bike for me and my fit, then I would have positioned them a little bit lower on the bars. So it's not really a con because it's a very easy fix. It's time to get the new Aethos on the scales now and see what it comes in at. Now, the scales I am using are the Park Tool scales, which can be a bit dodgy. So I've weighed it 6 times in a row until I've had the same answer 6 times in a row. And it is coming in at 6.17 kilos. So not bad at all, quite respectable if you ask me. However, I know with the right spec, this bike can be a whole lot lighter. The Aethos has always kind of sat alone without any real close competitors, and now even more so with its geometry change. So who is this bike for? Well, I think it'll suit someone with money to spend, someone who wants something dynamic and performance focused but doesn't have the flexibility of a professional cyclist, someone who prioritizes lightweight over aero performance, someone who likes to get out of the saddle and get competitive on the climbs, and perhaps someone who wants to do 98% of their riding on the road but may want to pop in some bigger tyres and nip across some hard-packed gravel or just some really rough tarmac. On the other hand, this bike is not for anyone who's looking for bang for buck, nor is it for someone who wants an out-and-out race bike. Right, let's talk about it. Let's get on to price. And yes, this new bike is remortgage your house expensive. While the SRAM Red built Aethos comes in at £11,499, the previous Aethos was listed at £12,000. So Specialized hasn't tried to break into a new price echelon with this bike. Instead, they've just kept it right at the very top of the scale with all the other top-end bikes. However, don't expect that price tag to stay the same. It is not uncommon for bikes to launch with a price and then be slowly inflated over time. Builds start at £5,499 for the expert models. That's for a Force or Ultegra built bike with Roval C38 carbon wheels and a 2-piece cockpit consisting of Specialized lightweight alloy stem and its Alpinist carbon bars. The Pro bikes step things up a notch as it comes with the new Alpinist carbon cockpit, Alpinist CL2 wheels, slightly nicer tyres and TPU tubes, and a power meter on the Force build. Again, you do get the choice of either a Force or Ultegra built bike, and those bikes come in at £7,250. Between the Expert and Pro builds, you'll save about 300 grams in weight as a ballpark average. And that's all coming from equipment choices, as both models use the same 10R carbon frame, a step down from the S-Works' 12R carbon frame, which would see you save another 100 grams. Like I mentioned earlier, the Aethos sits in its own category. It's really hard to compare it to other bikes on the market because ultimately, no other bike I can think of does exactly what the Aethos does. While previously, it might have been fair to compare it to things like the new Scott Addict RC, the Viglia Verticale and the Cervelo R5, and many other lightweight climbing bikes, the Aethos's new, slightly more relaxed outlook means that any comparison I make is ultimately a bit pointless, because I don't believe the new Aethos will be compared against those previously mentioned bikes. If you are a customer for the new Aethos, I think it's going to be because you really want the new Aethos, rather than it coming out on top after tossing up between all the different options. Which build would I buy? Well, looking at the range, I'd either go all out, sell a kidney and buy the S-Works SRAM Red build, or I'd buy the Pro frame set and build it up myself. I'm going to attempt to try and sum this bike up now, and the best way I can describe it is approachable performance. Despite the highest stack, this is not an endurance bike, far from it. It lacks many of the mod cons of the current sweep of endurance bikes. What this is a performance bike with the sharp edges rounded off. It has the same timeless look and design which made the original Aethos so popular 5 years ago. And after my short experience riding the bike, the ride feel is also timeless and will now likely suit even more people, which is good because it might just be another 1,820 days before it gets updated again. I won't say that it's better than the old Aethos, it's just a bit different and slightly more future-proofed. The original Aethos is still a great bike, and it will remain to be one. And the side effect of Specialized launching a new bike is that the old ones will go on sale. And maybe, right now, if you don't want a softened round the edges Aethos, the original is the one to buy. I have a suspicion that the original Aethos will become a rather sought after frame set because I doubt that Specialized will make the Aethos with a race bike geometry ever again. Before I go, I'll leave you with one final thought. There is now a much bigger distinction in Specialized road lineup. The tarmac is for racing. The Aethos is for performance riding for real people. The Roubaix is for serious endurance and all-road riding. The Alley is for entry-level riders, and the Alley Sprint is for racers on a budget. Right now, each bike occupies its own little corner, and I wonder, when the new tarmac comes in the next year or two, if its DNA changes to make it slightly more tailored for being lightweight, or potentially more aero, it could hint to whether or not the Venge could ever make a return. It's too soon to say, but you can never say never.